April. I can't believe it's April already. Strategic Planning Committee meeting. So looks like we're still waiting on a couple more committee members. I do know that Amy Cubbage is not able to join us tonight, and Caitlin might be a little late here. But hopefully we'll get a couple more folks. Thank you to everyone who has joined us so far. Couple of reminders that we are now live streaming these meetings, or I should say LTD, working with Metro is now live streaming these meetings. So we are on channel 21 or online as well. It's very exciting. Hopefully we have some folks participating from home. We have a really, really packed agenda. So I'm gonna try and move us through this front part pretty quickly, but we'll be focusing on the strategic business plan again for the entire meeting, focusing first on getting caught up on what the consultants and staff and the board have been working on so far, specifically around mission, vision, and values, and then revisiting some of the communications plan discussion from last month, and hoping to make a recommendation to the board on this meeting, during this meeting, excuse me, on that plan, as well as any feedback that we have on what's happened so far. Before I hand it over, or I should say, before we do audience participation, I will do a quick roll call, although I know we have a couple of folks that will be jumping on here in the next few minutes. So I'm just gonna run down my list. You wanna let us know if you're here. Eliza Whalen.
Here.
Hey, Eliza. Alma.
Here.
Hi, Alma. Pete.
Here.
Hi, Pete. Emily.
I'm here. Hey, everyone.
Hey, Emily. Jerry.
Here.
Hey, Jerry. And Franny.
Yeah.
Hey, Franny. Thanks for joining us. Any committee members that I missed so far?
Mary Ann's in the waiting
Okay.
room.
Mary Ann's in the waiting room. Well, we will get her out of the waiting room here. Any other announcements or additions to the agenda before we do audience participation? Okie dokie. And Mary Ann, hopefully you are out of the waiting room.
I'm here, thanks.
Hey, Mary. Okay, I will do my quick spiel about this. So this is the section of our agenda that is reserved for members of the public to address the committee on any issue. If we have any folks participating who would like to make a public comment or testimony tonight, you can use the raise your hand button on Zoom. If you're attending on the phone, you'll press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. When it's your time to speak, we'll call your name. And again, if you're on the phone only, we'll call the last 4 digits of your phone number. Before you begin your testimony, if you can let us know your name, your city of residence, and who you're representing, if anyone, for the audio record. And once you've provided your testimony, your hand will be lowered. Please don't raise your hand again. Only one opportunity to speak will be provided tonight. If you're not able or not wanting to speak publicly tonight, you can provide your testimony to the committee via email to Camille, the clerk of the board, at clerk@ltd.org. We'll limit public testimony tonight to 3 minutes per person. We'll pull up a timer on the screen and let you know when those 3 minutes are up. All right, if we have any members of the public who would like to make public comment, you can go ahead and raise your hand.
I am not showing anyone indicating they would like to speak. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, for the folks who are watching at home or participating with us on Zoom tonight, we appreciate you all being here. All right, I think that's it on my end. I don't see any other committee members, so I will go ahead and hand it over to Tom, maybe, to kick us off.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. So tonight we're going to spend some time taking you through a little more in a little more depth the development of the strategic business plan, what it is, how it's going to work, the components of it. And it looked like we have both Lindsay and Mark from TransPro here tonight. So they'll be working on that. And that's going to be I would say that's this presentation, this section of the discussion is an opportunity for you all to ask any questions you might have about how the strategic business plan works, how it's coming together, anything that you might want to know about how it works. And the idea is that this will give you a better sense of what the plan is and give you a context for thinking about the communications plan, and that will follow. That'll be a separate presentation we'll have, and we'll go through that. And again, at any point along the way, if you have any questions you want to ask, go for it, and we'll get started. Lindsay, if you want to kick things off.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tom. And thanks everyone for having us here for this meeting and for allowing us to really spend a good chunk of time with you to go through the strategic business plan, refresh on the process, but also really go through some of the same exercises that we've been through with the directors group and with the leadership council within LTD, and begin to discuss more of how we've gotten to these draft mission and vision statements and list of values, kind of tee up what's to come and talk more about places where you'll be plugged into the process and have opportunities to really provide meaningful feedback and ask critical questions that will really help strengthen the ultimate plan that will be adopted by the board by the end of the process. So really do appreciate your candid feedback and involvement in this as we go forward. I'm going to ask, I had an opportunity to introduce myself the last time as the project manager for this effort, but Mark Ash, our CEO, is joining us tonight. And I'm wondering, Mark, if you could just introduce yourself briefly for the folks here who haven't had a chance to meet you yet.
Sure. Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, Mark Ash, CEO, founder of TransPro Consulting. Have spent the better part of 25 years in public sector. Was a transit CEO for about 9 years for a mid-sized organization. We had about 500 buses, about 1,000 employees, moved about 75,000 customers a day in Rochester. And 10 years ago, formed a group that shares our passion for working with teams like Lane, and obviously you as volunteers in the community that have a real passion for delivering both great customer experiences coupled with great community value. And so I think it's the opportunity to work with groups like you that really can offer counsel to both boards and management teams on how exactly to deliver that greatest value to both customers and community. So look forward to taking you through the conversation, and we welcome your counsel and feedback for the management team in particular as to how they might think as we begin to finalize this and ultimately present it to the board for their consideration. Look forward to spending the evening with you.
Thanks, Mark. So we will get into the agenda. We're going to, again, go through background and process, go through the why exercise, share mission, vision, core values, draft statements, have additional discussion at that point. We'll talk about next steps and what to expect coming up. We like to do a one-word close at the end of these types of sessions. But then we'll move on to a separate discussion around the communications plan before we wrap the evening. So we start off the strategic planning process with these 4 key questions. The first is, how does LTD define success? The next is, what will LTD actually do to deliver that success? What metrics will LTD track to ensure what you're doing will allow you to be successful? Who is responsible for the delivery of those activities and the performance that enhances? So the whole process is really structured around answering these questions for the organization. And that really sets up this framework for ongoing performance management and delivery of the outcomes that matter and it becomes a living document and something that that is managed throughout the year. It's not something that is just referenced once in a while. You'll see through the process. It's really about transforming how work gets done and how outcomes are delivered for the community. So I think we shared this the last time. This is just to frame out the actual process that we're engaging in. And this is a process that we've used with agencies, transit agencies and other public sector agencies across the country to really align around the ability to deliver on these success outcomes. And we always start with the mission, vision, and core values, and those being the really foundational elements that everything else is aligned to. So you can see there's a lot of collaboration built into that, that first task. So we really started with leveraging a lot of the work that LTD has already done through customer surveys and community surveys, employee surveys, a lot of plans and studies that have really provided some good baseline understanding of community priorities and things that are important to the community and customers. We also engaged in a number of workshops with the executive team and leadership council, as well as departments, and really are distilling these mission vision statements and hope to get your feedback and an opportunity to really dig into these as well. And we'll talk about a community survey to get some more community perspectives on these mission and vision statements as well. The task 2 is taking it a step further. So really engaging in these collaborative sessions to identify what are the performance metrics at the organization level and at the department level to be able to really live out that mission and vision and those overall strategic goals. And so that's taking in a lot of information around what departments may be measuring already and putting it into a system where it's more, we're able to actually see how they connect up to those bigger, broader organizational goals. And also having clear ownership so that we can really understand if there's a metric that that is trending in a direction that we want to impact. We know who the right team is to lead the effort to improve that metric. The communications plan, task 3, that's something that's been concurrent with the other tasks. As you know, we shared a high-level thinking around the communications plan the last time that we met with your group. We've dug in and worked with the LTD team to get at a lot more detail to that. So you'll see a lot more detail, and we look forward to sharing that with you. And then finally, it comes together into this draft strategic business plan that we'll also be bringing for you all to provide input on. And that comes together with the final strategic plan and scorecard. So it all comes together into a package that we'll be able to share with the community, the whole workforce, the board, and that's something that the management team will manage to, and it will provide you ongoing structure and framework for providing advisory services to Lane as they're implementing the plan and as they're continuing to refine and improve the plan over time. So that's at a high level how the process works across these tasks. And we shared the schedule. We've actually, since meeting last, we have extended the schedule by about a month to allow for a bit more engagement in the process. So that is both to have more engagement with your group, with the SPC, but also to have a little bit more time to roll out the targeted stakeholder survey, as well as time internally within the departments at LTD to really dig into the elements of the plan and allow more opportunities for engagement. So we are really working towards adoption of the plan in July of this year. So I wanted to touch base a little bit on the role of the board in strategic planning, and then by extension, the role of SPC as an advisory body that really plays an important role both in advising the management team, but also in advising the board in strategic matters. So as you can see here, and we shared this model of thinking through strategic planning of the why, what, how, who the last time. But the why is where we start. Again, that's the mission, vision, values. It's the core purpose and direction for the organization. That cascades down to the what. So it's great to have those lofty aspirational statements to really identify the core purpose for being. But then the what takes it into really clear, measurable strategic outcomes in high level areas like customer experience and financial sustainability and really big outcome areas like that. That's really where the board lives. So the board is the most important role is to really ensure that LTD does have that clear direction and that they're delivering on their mission, vision, and outcomes. So that's something that really empowers the management team to then design the work plan and the performance metrics to be able to deliver in alignment with those big foundational areas. So as we cascade to the how and the how is where we're capturing the tactics, the work activities, tying that to our financial plan so that it's something that we're able to really implement. And again, leading into the performance metrics. So having really clear ownership of who is responsible for getting the work done that produces those overall outcomes. And so with this, the way we think about this is that in a strategic planning process like this, where we're setting up this framework for continuous performance management and continuous improvement of the organization, the ultimate authority for adopting the plan lies with the board. But the management team's role is to really bring the direction to the board and to align around the process by which we're going to go through the strategic planning development and ultimately getting feedback along the way to ensure that we're ending up at a place where we're aligned on those big overall outcomes. And then by extension, your group as the SPC, as I mentioned at the outset, you play a really important role both advising the board and advising the management team. So what we would suggest as we're going through this process, that one of the key things that you all can really do is ask the question as you're seeing the information and hearing what's being presented and reviewing materials. Are there things that you're not seeing? Are there things that you feel the management team hasn't addressed or isn't thinking about that you feel they should be based on your perspectives as representatives of organizations in the community or partner agencies? And so to bring those questions to the table so that the management team really can consider them and consider how that may impact the direction of the plan. So I would just urge you all to continue to think about that, those key critical questions around, is this making sense based on these overall directions and what you know of the community's priorities that you're representing. And I'd like to invite Mark, if you have any other additions that would be helpful just in setting sort of context and experience from other agencies.
Sure. So I think maybe three things that I would say to add to what Lindsay provided in regards to context here. In high-performing public sector organizations, these processes are management-led and board-approved. And what I mean by that is, by definition, all of the authority lives with the board. That's where the authority lives. But most board members are involved with the organization typically 2 hours a week, maybe 2 or 3 hours a month. Whereas the management team is involved with the organization 200 hours a month. They live within the organization, so they spend their time there. And it's critical that as the management team proposes to the board success outcomes, a work plan to deliver that success, the metrics that will measure whether the work plan is being effective to achieve those outcomes, that they're all aligned. And what can happen sometimes in a non-high performing organization is the board will impose outcomes upon a management team that the management team doesn't have a chance of being able to achieve. And so it's the criticality of putting them together and making sure that the management team is very well informed by the passions and the interests of the board and the community and the customers and of employees, a variety of constituency groups, but having the management team really lead that effort, working in many ways to convince the board that this is the best direction for the organization to take. At the end of the day, all of the authority lives with the board. That's how it works. And I know this board and I know this CEO and this management team welcome this group's counsel as they're thinking about that. That's why we're having this conversation. And so we'll just put it in that context. Lindsay, I'll throw back to you, but it's that criticality of management-led, board-approved.
Thanks, Mark. And so we'll come back to this by the end. Just make sure, as we're going through, we'll have a little bit of discussion and just make sure we answer any questions, clarifying questions about this. So wanted to share, just as we think about the why, what, how, and who, we consider it, sometimes it's helpful to think about it, how they all work together as a structure to really put a framework for the plan. So if we think about at the very top, the roof of our temple, if you will, the mission, vision, and success outcomes, that's we're all really looking to stand up as an organization. Within that, in order to achieve those, we have these strategic pillars. These are the big strategic areas that the outcomes are aligned around, and that's what's holding up and providing that organizing principle of the plan. So we have those strategic areas of focus or strategic pillars. We have work activities that are aligned with each of those, and we have a budget. So we fund those activities that allow us to engage in the right work to produce the outcomes. And then at the foundation of this is ongoing quarterly performance metrics and results reporting, which again is where you all will come in really even after this plan is implemented. It's not the end. This is really the beginning of a process that will continue on indefinitely. And so there will be report backs on how we're doing and if the things we're doing are actually producing the outcomes. And if they're not, how do we think about making adjustments and adapting in our next iteration of the plan and making those decisions. So this becomes a really, again, living document and changing the way that work gets done much more strategically. Another framework that we think about just to help show the potential of this to really change how decisions are made strategically is in the budget development. So on the left-hand side, traditional budget model often starts with the budget, and then departments build budgets or build their plans within that budget, and then align with the employees that they have. And that's kind of a typical, especially in the public sector, kind of a typical process. The success plan budget model is really thinking about success first. So thinking about what are those big outcomes that we want to achieve? What are the things we want to engage in order to achieve that success? We then adopt a budget to fund that plan, and there will be some give and take because there are obviously real budget constraints, but at least we're starting with what we want to achieve, and then we're able to make some adjustments. We align employees to deliver that, and then again, the important crucial part is that we manage performance aligned with those performance metrics and work activities, and we incorporate that into performance-based reviews. So all of this is, again, in service of helping everyone, every individual throughout the organization to know how their work is impacting ultimate success for the organization, which is tied to delivering better service to customers and providing value to the community. So that is, and something that will take time to get that process. It's not any organization we've worked with, it's not an overnight switch into this model, but it's something that we build towards, and each year gets a little bit tighter. Those financial planning processes and strategic planning processes get tighter and tighter. So we wanted to transition into this exercise that we've found to be really powerful and meaningful to a lot of organizations that we work with. And we went through this with the directors group, as well as the larger leadership council of 30 or 40 employees. And we'd like to go through it with you all tonight as well. We'll start with a clip from Simon Sinek, who is an author of several books. Start With Why is the one that we're really referencing. You may have seen this TED Talk. It's something that we really connected with the way that he communicates about the importance of starting with why. And I believe you all, or some of you, have been involved in some exercises related to starting with why. But just thought we'd share a brief clip to just start off the exercise. So I'm just going to switch my screen for a moment. Hang on.
Circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean, what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Nah. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done. That's how most sales is done. And that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do. We say how we're different or how we're better. And we expect some sort of behavior or purchase of both, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. People don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
So as I transition, Mark, do you want to just share a little bit about that clip and just, sort of how we use that to inspire this mission vision exercise?
Every time I listen to it, I listen to it like I've heard it for the first time. And I might dare say the only reason Lindsay is presenting to you this evening is because she buys what we do here. It is totally about the why that Lindsay is even here to present to you all. The reason that it's critical to tie back to you all is, as the CEO and her management team at LTD, propose to the board their why, their passion as to why the organization exists. From there flows the outcomes. The first step in the journey are the specific outcomes that we will produce in the pursuit of that why. From there, we build our business plan, our work activities to produce those outcomes, measure the right things, build a budget that funds those work activities. But it all starts with why. It all starts with that understanding of, why are we here? Why are we doing this? That passion that causes us to be here. We're here because we believe that public sector organizations can do amazing things. That's why we're here. And I think the CEO at LTD and their team, you'll see their passion for the future in a minute as they begin to think about the outcomes that they want to produce for your community. Lindsay?
Great, thanks, Mark. And very, very true. That is definitely what inspires me to get to work every day, is getting to work with organizations like LTD on these issues. But we thought it would be helpful. We did this with, again, I mentioned the directors and the leadership council, of just choosing a couple of words. It doesn't have to be 5. So if you think of 3, or if it's a couple, a short phrase instead of words, it's fine. But would really like to invite you all to share, as you think about why you do what you do in terms of joining the SPC, why are you volunteering your time to support Lane Transit District and thinking about how to improve strategically for the future. I'd love to go around and just, we can take a moment for you to think for a moment on what those words you would select would be, but would love to invite you all to just share some of those. So I'll pause for now, just to give you a second to think about it.
Do I get to do the theme from Jeopardy while people are thinking, Lindsay?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone want to go first?
Jerry will go first. Serving, connecting, and building community.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
This is Alma. It's more of a phrase, I guess. Like, a better world is possible.
Could you say that one more time? A better world, what?
A better world is possible.
Nice.
I can go. I also said, or was thinking, connecting, as well as exploration and car-free.
Thanks, Leah.
I have a couple. One is providing choices in travel. And then the other one is removing obstacles.
This is Marianne. I had providing choices was one of mine, as well as sustainability.
Great, thanks.
I wrote down equity, mobility, and community.
I'll go. I put down that connecting, building, improving, and in exploring.
Thank you. I can't tell. Do we have one more? Emily? I don't think we heard from you.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm with my little baby and he's kind of loud tonight. So I'm trying to just listen more than anything. And I don't have anything new to add to the ones that have been already provided. So I liked all of those. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks, Emily. Did we miss anyone? Oh, Greg. Oh, we can't hear you. Anyone else having trouble hearing Greg?
Yeah, Councillor Evans, I think you might be having a microphone issue.
Well, we'll circle back.
Well, and maybe Greg could put them in the, I guess we don't have a chat now, but that was a way to try and get his information.
All right. Well, I will just share that a number of those words are also words and phrases that we heard among the Directors Group and Leadership Council. Just to share some of the words that came up in theirs were community impact, access, collaboration, equity, sustainability, growth, service, and then I definitely see, and I'm sure you already saw a preview of connecting was certainly something that came up and has landed in the draft mission statement. A lot of the, yeah, I think all of those words that you mentioned have really come through in the conversation. So I think even at this, very core, basic, foundational level, there's a lot of alignment both within SPC, but also within the LTD organization. So that's something that that is good to hear, and I think can provide that really solid foundation for building out this plan that will allow you all to make sure that the organization is really delivering on those things, and that's used to inspire the workforce as well, to continue to be delivering this really high quality service to the community. So we wanted to share just a little bit about mission vision. We think about the mission as why we exist as an organization, and we think about the vision as what we're striving to achieve. And so the mission is again really foundational, and the vision is looking out a little bit farther. So it's usually looking out further into the future on again what we're striving to become. When we think about asking ourselves what are LTD's organizational mission, vision, and values, we started with taking some inspiration or looking at what other organizations in the transit industry or transit adjacent industries, how they encapsulate their mission statements. So we look at a couple of peer transit agencies. PSTA is their mission is to safely connect people to places. Long Beach Transit, you see, dedicated to connecting communities and moving people, making everyday life better. I think about Uber, disruptor in the industry. We ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. So kind of interesting there, they don't mention transportation, but they talk about this motion, moving. Lyft, on the other hand, they are talking about improving people's lives with the world's best transportation. So you can even see differences in these two organizations and how they're framing out their missions. Transdev, private operator, empowering freedom to move for everyone every day. So we thought about just the clarity of these statements. They're easy to remember, they're easy to align around. They're something that employees don't have to go searching for the mission statement. They really connect to it in a clear way. The vision, Again, when we think about some examples of how organizations articulate their longer term vision, these are just a couple of examples. The one on the left is from Sacramento. Their vision is a leader in providing mobility options for our community. Cleveland is on the right, leading the delivery of diverse mobility solutions and community connections. And then Long Beach has a longer vision, leading provider of transportation options, delivering innovative and high-performing services within a multimodal network that transforms the social, environmental, and economic well-being of the diverse communities we serve. And that's something that you'll see coming through in the vision statement for LTD, that this triple bottom line is something that came up in a lot of the work sessions and groups, and that's something that that I heard in some of your whys around sustainability, and that's something that you'll see coming through in the plan as well. This is just an example of a before and after. So a lot of organizations go through this exercise of, at one point trying to really touch on a lot of things and fit a lot of things into the mission statement in order to, encapsulate a lot of different areas. So you can see on the left, it was a lengthier mission statement, trying to talk a little bit more about how they're delivering service. But then after going through a strategic planning process, landed on a much more streamlined mission statement that gets to the core of how they're delivering service. And then the aspects of that service, like safety and reliability and operating fiscally responsible, that is represented in other areas of the plan on how they're going to achieve that. So this is where we started with the LTD's existing statements, and thinking about the mission statement of what we do. So you can see, a lengthy statement about what the organization does, providing reliable transit services that address the needs of the community, providing a viable alternative to the automobile, providing leadership in the development of the region's transportation system, practicing safety, practicing sound fiscal and sustainability management. So all of those things are great, and they're things that that we want to provide, but at the same time, it's difficult to remember or to really connect with on a daily basis, because it is such a lengthy statement that's trying to cover a lot of ground. The purpose statement is a lot more streamlined. So thinking about why we exist, we believe in providing people with the independence to achieve their goals, creating a more vibrant, sustainable, and equitable community. And you'll see that core vision statement is something that carried over into the working draft of the proposed statement, with just some modifications. So the working drafts right now are the mission being connecting our community, and the vision being, in all that we do, we seek to create a more connected, sustainable, and equitable community. So again, the team had a lot of robust dialogue around what these statements could be, what's important to capture at this very high level. I can hear already that some of your why statements talked about connecting the community, and it talked about sustainability and equity. So some of those elements are captured really here at the highest level of strategy with the organization. Tom or AJ or Mark, if there's anything you'd like to add just before we get into discussion on sort of the evolution. I think, Tom, you had a really eloquent way of mentioning sort of the evolution of this and how we came to this. So I'd love to invite you to just share a little bit more.
Oops. Sure, if I can figure out how to unmute myself. Yeah, like Lindsay was talking about, we spent had some good discussion about how to articulate mission and vision, and we'll get to values as well. And you know, I think I'll just say the robustness came out of there's a deeply shared sense of mission, vision, and values within the organization, and that just came out as we talked about things. And you know, I was part of the group that established some of the initial wording around how we do things today, and it was just really a great process that we reached to figuring out you know, that we could be much more concise. You know, connecting our communities is what we're about. In all that we do, we seek to create a more connected, sustainable, and equitable community. There was just a whole lot of conversation. It was at the directors meeting, it was at the leadership council meeting, which is our middle management group, around this. And it was just great to see the conversation and have us all settle on what these two statements really mean to us. So.
Thanks, Tom. AJ, anything to add?
Sure, I'm not double muted. I'll move my camera a little bit. What I do want to say is, I think the groundwork that we laid before the holidays with FCC really helped us not to start from scratch. We spent a lot of time kind of going through all that, vetting it, building on it, and then really including our frontline employees as well. We actually did a breaking out into groups. And, you know, we really took to heart what Mark, Ash, and Lindsay told us about, like, everyone in your organization has to, like, be able to say what you do. It can't just be, you know, the top management that really have this philosophy. It really has to be something that everybody can rally around, that employees can really get around, and that your community can really understand. And as we're looking at what we're trying to do, and as I heard all the values that you guys talked about, you know, as we talk about the multimodal, like, what are we trying to do? And when we came up, when I say we, I'm trying not to take credit for that, because that really was a collaboration of employees. It's like, we're just trying to connect communities, our rural areas, our metro areas, neighborhoods. And it was like, wow, we were trying to use a lot of words to say what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect communities, and all the values just really support that. So I was really happy to see it so simple. I will tell you that we would have never come up with that had FCC really not provided us the foundation, had we not gone through that lengthy exercise with our different employee groups. So just wanted to share that what our experience has been in trying to evolve to this point.
Thank you. So I'd love to invite you all, just your initial reactions, and if you have any either questions around these or you know, things that you feel could be missing that you'd like for the management team to be considering as they're really ultimately refining these into final drafts that would be presented for consideration of the board. So I'll open it up to the dialogue.
Hi, thanks. First of all, I love this. I love its simplicity and how it gets right to the point. I think it's great. What I think about with transit, and where I really hope that we always get, is I compared the convenience of the automobile. And that's why people will go to that first, because it's convenient. It's safe. Relatively, it gets you in and out to door kind of thing. And so I think, you know, how would I want to bring up transit to that level, closer to the convenience of an automobile? And I just think, you know, the idea of transit that's safe, convenient, and provides certainty to the community, to the people moving business. That's what I was thinking about when I was thinking about the vision. You know, if we could get there, making it as convenient as possible, as safe, and provide certainty, I think ridership would improve and more people would use it and more people might leave their cars behind. And then we would have a more sustainable, connected community. But I wouldn't change the words. I'm just adding my thoughts and ideas about how I'd like to see transit operate more effectively, I guess. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful to even if it's not changing the words, even knowing how, you know, what that means to you all as representatives of organizations and of constituents in the community, things that they'll measure as an organization and the tactics to be able to do those things. So that's really helpful to provide that. Thank you, Franny.
This is Alma, and forgive me if my internet cuts out. Internet can call me out if you need to. I love the idea of this vision being able to sort of be a filter as well when we're making decisions at all levels of the organization. So we can use this as an opportunity to say, you know, if we're making a decision or thinking about a direction to go in, does this help create a more connected community? Is it sustainable? Is there equity? You know, so there's the simplicity of this is wonderful, but it also allows us to really think about decision making or choices, and again at all levels of the organization. So I think that's simple as always better, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really well said. As particularly the strategics, you know, and using this as a lens. That's really the power of this over time is going to appreciate that.
So I'd like to kind of add on to that. You know, I agree with the last everybody who's already spoken. That I absolutely love the simplicity here. You know, your mission and your vision, those are kind of guiding statements and very broad based. But you know, the old version started to drill down into a lot of specifics about facilities and blah blah blah. But you know, those are things that change over time, and what really matters is what do you do, and this really does get to that point and in a very effective way. And you know, you can talk about facilities later as you drill down, but and I'm just using that as an example. But I really like the brevity and the conciseness of what has been brought here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Anyone else?
Lindsay, will you remind us which one of these inspires the workforce? Is it supposed to be the mission or the vision?
Really, I mean, the mission, both of them. So I would say both of them are things that really would be used to for the workforce to really connect with. The mission is kind of the more, I would say the central, the core purpose for being, and then the vision's about what we're kind of striving to become. So both definitely matter for inspiring the workforce.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what others have said that I appreciate the brevity. I appreciate that both statements kind of lead with connectedness. When I think about, we've talked about like useful service and useful transit a lot over the last year or two. And to me, useful service means I feel connected to places and where I need to go and to my community. So I appreciate that that's a through line in both of these. And I just want to emphasize and lift up what Alma said, that I think I've heard from you all that through this process is that this really is meant to be kind of a lens for decision making in the future, and to kind of carry this as a central framing for every project and every kind of discussion that we have. And going back to this, and I think because of how straightforward it is, and you can point to the key factors, that makes it a lot more an easier process to do.
Great, thank you.
And this is Jerry. I want to, the one that we've had historic problems with is keeping the business community joined in with this process. And I really like the vision. I use the building, maybe it's because I have listened to President Biden too much, but I do think that there's got to kind of a component that there is some future. And I don't know if building the right word or what the right word is, but connecting and something our community is what I would like to see.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jerry.
And that's kind of where I was going with my question, was connecting our communities. So I really like the vision. Let me start with that. I think the mission is missing something. I don't know what. It just doesn't have that like really big wow factor of like, we're connecting our community well. We're connecting our community, you know, with enthusiasm. I don't know what the right phrasing is, but I'm a little bit like, yes, we're connecting our community. I feel like that's almost it goes without saying. So how do we make it a little bit more inspiring to create that inspired action I think that we're looking for? But we're definitely on the right track. And I'm really liking that it's a very straightforward, easy to remember phrase.
Thanks, Emily.
The only thing I would say, Emily, for your reflection on that comment is, as we begin to think about the success outcomes, right? So the mission is the reason we exist. The vision is what we strive to become. And our success outcomes begin to get, I think, to where you are, which is that stake in the ground where we're going to define with clarity what, I'll use your word, well means. We're going to be really specific about that. So we'll see when we get there, but I think that piece you're asking for shows up in the success outcomes.
I guess I'm just going to push on you a little bit, because I think this isn't just for the strategic planning committee, it's also for the board, it's also for our directors, it's also for the community. And I think if the community said, oh, this is your mission statement, wow, that's what you came up with, that's what you already do. So I just want to make sure that we're also providing this clarity to the community as well.
I appreciate that comment, Emily, and I think it's a good note, kind of building on Jerry's comment around making sure we're continuing to be kind of forward thinking. Eliza, Councilor Evans, Marianne, anything to add? We still can't hear you, Greg. I'm sorry. You want to try calling in, otherwise we'll connect offline.
All right. Well then.
Eliza, I saw a head shake. Marianne, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm still ruminating. It'll come to me in like a half hour, probably.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, Lindsay.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, definitely feel free to chime in throughout. So wanted to share a little bit more too about the values. AJ alluded a little bit to the process. So the values are really how we'll behave on our way to the future. And that's how we think about them. And we often encounter organizations that may have a set of values, and a lot of times they're on a poster somewhere in the organization, or they're on the website, and people don't really connect with them or really think about how they're demonstrating them in the organization. Through this process, we again want to think really strategically and thoughtfully about how we're interacting as employees of LTD in order to be successful and deliver on these deliver on our mission and vision. And so they're really the few guiding principles that will create this high-performing and healthy workplace. They're essential for creating success in the delivery of our work. And so we had quite a lot of dialogue, starting with the directors group, but then also working with the leadership council, which is that, again, that group of 30 to 40 sort of middle management of the organization. And then as AJ mentioned, having the rest of the workforce engage in exercises around the values. So at the Inside the Bus forum, I should say, folks from throughout the organization, frontline employees, as well as administrative employees, got into these breakout groups and worked through exercises on how they demonstrate these values and what behaviors represent demonstrating them, and what behaviors demonstrate not living out these values. And through that, we're really working towards building out these value statements, and they will not only be incorporated into the plan, but also be incorporated into the language of the organization. So organizations that we see being very successful and having that culture around high performance and really living out the mission and vision, they really find ways to instill this, whether it's through the performance review process or through kind of department meetings going over a value, or again, incorporating that into decision-making lenses. So we think about the values as being a really important internal component about how the workforce is engaging. So the existing values that you see on the right, or on the left, I'm sorry, those are what we started with. And we had a lot of discussion around what we wanted to capture and how we wanted to convey it in this strategic business plan. So there was a large list, probably 20 or 25 words and values thrown out that really were distilled through those working sessions and through the department meetings and the Inside the Bus forum into these values that you see on the right-hand side, and the more behavioral definitions to provide more detail around what it would mean to have a value around respect and have a value around integrity. Those are informed by these what we call them in-out exercises that have been conducted with a really wide swath of the organization. So the actual values list are respect, integrity, innovation, diversity, safety, and collaboration. So those are, the big categories of value that the team feels really passionately about encompassing in their work. And we're looking forward to sharing, these working behavioral definitions that they'll really be built out to be more a bit lengthier statements. But would love to just invite, if you have questions or thoughts on these values, similar to the mission vision, would just love to hear that, so that the management team, again, and us as consultants helping them through this process can just, have more feedback to incorporate into how we're thinking about the values as an organization.
Go ahead, Brandy. I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, so thank you. I like these values too: respect, integrity, innovation, diversity, safety, and collaboration. I sit on my diversity action team in ODOT for Region 2. And one of the things that kind of came up in the discussions with employees was that kind of the intersection between respect and diversity is inclusion. That word inclusion, feeling that you're part of something. And that also gets to that connectivity, that you're invited in, you're included, you're part of, you're not you're not held off. I think that's just a good word in inclusion. Maybe instead of diversity, but or in addition to. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
And I just want to emphasize what Franny said. I mean, I think inclusion is, it's actually a verb and a noun, and it is more helpful than diversity.
Thanks.
Looks like Greg has his hand up.
Sorry, Greg.
I know, I really want to hear from Greg.
Yeah, I think calling in might be the best option.
I've called in before. It's not that bad. It works. I was going to ask if there was a particular reason why this number of values, or if that was more than other organizations or less.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we, one of our partners in this work is Michael McNally of Avia Corporation, who's local, and he has really led the values and has worked with a number of organizations, as we have as well. Usually his recommendation was kind of 6 to 7 is kind of typical. That's usually what we see. We sometimes will, somewhere in that range, like 5 to 7 or 8 is pretty typical. But there's not an exact, we didn't kind of set out to say we're only identifying 6 words, but we wanted to kind of be in a manageable range.
Just the words that missing for me then on that note is something about efficiency or reliability, something to that effect, because I feel like these values are really important, but I also want to acknowledge, like, as we get further into this process, like we really are moving people and in mass transit. And I feel like we still haven't really got there yet. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm just rushing it.
I think one of the things that we're trying to get at with the values are kind of how we behave. So I would say I do agree with you, and we're kind of hearing in the performance metrics, as departments are coming up with performance metrics to include some of those metrics that get at efficiency and reliability are being identified. I would say for the values, we're really trying to think about words that can be captured in a behavioral sense. So how we're working together, as opposed to how we're delivering service. So that would be the kind of the framing for how we think about the values.
Go ahead, Alma, and then I'll go after you.
Sorry, I can't see everyone who's raising their hand. I was going to say, I think to that point, talking about the diversity versus inclusion or inclusive, because diversity can also apply to like our fleet. Do we have a diverse type of fleet? Do we have diversity in our offerings to the community? Are we diversifying the type of, so there's that's kind of like, there's more action and more depth with diversity and more sustainability with thinking about that as opposed to like inclusion. But I absolutely see the point of other members of the SBC. I'm just kind of putting that out there in terms of looking at that behavior versus, just for that word. So that's why I actually kind of like the word diversity in this context.
That's interesting. I was going to say kind of the opposite. In terms of, Lindsay, your comment around behavior, to me, diversity is like who's at the table, the diversity of services, right? But the behavior is inclusion is more about behavior to me. And I think, diversity, equity, inclusion, right? All three of those words are different. We lump them together all the time. I'm by no means an expert in that, in how that would apply to this process, but I think it's an important consideration. What are we actually trying to get across here? And I think, if we're talking about diversity of the workforce of LTD, that isn't necessarily like behavior to me. So something to consider. Something I've also been thinking about, and maybe we'll get to this next, is whether some things are values versus outcomes. So a couple words I've been thinking about are like access and equity that have come up a lot in this process for us, and going back and forth about whether those are values or outcomes. And I'm leaning more towards outcomes, but that might be something we get to next.
Yeah, thank you both. Those are helpful comments and questions, and I'll address, so thinking about, how these show up in kind of other areas of the plan. So access and equity are certainly areas that have come up in the discussions and the brainstorming around, as we further detail out the plan and the performance metrics and, how we're framing tactics. So I would say both of those things I've certainly seen and observed on the team being addressed in those ways. And I think your points around diversity and for what we're trying to get at there, I would say in the way that the team has been discussing it, it's been more about the people and really, I forget who mentioned this, that tie-in of, Franny, with the respect. So I think there's a few of these that kind of go hand in hand, and as folks have been talking about what it means to demonstrate the value of diversity, and I think whether it's using that word diversity or whether it's a different term is used like inclusion, it's more getting to that people aspect and different perspectives as opposed to thinking about like the fleet and things like that. That's more, I think, showing up in the more like the performance metrics or the tactics for delivering on these on the bigger outcomes. But these comments have been really, really helpful. Taking lots of notes for us to talk and reflect on. Any other thoughts?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can, yes.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
we can hear you.
Yeah, I had to go to the phone. So I want to echo what some of you have already said, because it's in the title, my job title. So it's about access, equity, inclusion, but within a social justice framework. And what I mean by that is that a lot of our ridership are transit dependent people. I grew up as a transit dependent kid. My father died, my mother sold a car, she never learned how to drive. And I didn't have a car until I was 23 years old, but I could get anywhere I wanted to on the bus or the train. So, I think it's about encompassing those values and looking toward the social justice framework that says to the community that we care about the whole community. We want to build an equitable platform for delivery of transit services and transportation services. We want to be inclusive, so it's not something that people can't reach and can't connect with, and inclusion, so that we're included on decision making and choices. One of the things that I've heard consistently over the years is about system design, route design. And we started out with the hub and spoke system years ago when I worked for LTD back in the 80s. But there is a larger demand for crosstown routing. And I think as we move forward in the future, that we're going to need to really think about how we respond to that quiet demand. I think a lot of people have gotten used to the system the way it is. But I think this is kind of the point where we could look, 10, 15, 20 years down the road about flipping the original model and building a new model that is more accessible, more equitable, and creates more inclusion. And Mark, I haven't seen you in a few years. I still have one of your books on my shelf.
This is Marianne. I just want to jump in there because I've been thinking about the word leadership, and it goes with what Councillor Evans was saying. As the region changes, as we become more dense, as we grow, LTD is really going to have to be a leader in changing the way people move themselves and in being a choice, the choice, instead of, oh, I'll just jump in the car. It's, oh, I'll just jump on the bus. And in order to do that, we're going to have to be leaders in the community.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both. Sorry, I was missing my mute button, but thank you, Councillor Evans, too, for for expounding on your thoughts. I'm glad we were able to get your voice in this. And I think one of the words you also mentioned, caring. That's something that a lot of folks on the team talked about, and even though it's not a word here, it's something I know is incorporated into some of the longer behavioral definitions, and it's something that that is clearly evident in showing up in how service is delivered. So I think the team really shares that thought of caring about the community, caring about connecting the community, and that's coming through a lot in the discussions as well.
Lindsay, I'm sorry, I feel like the squeaky wheel on this. So I feel like when I hear you talking, I'm like, okay, well then safety should be an outcome, not a value, and then caring should be a value and not an outcome. All right, so I'm getting a little bit confused on how some things are making the list and some things aren't. So maybe you could just help me understand better.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So a little bit on the evolution of these. Originally, caring was in place of safety. So the team and the exercises, what ended up happening is in all of the department meetings, as we were sharing these drafts, every department brought up safety as being a really core value. And it wasn't just, a lot of transit agencies we work with, you might hear operations talk about safety, and that's sort of the only group that really thinks about it. But at LTD, it came up in literally every single department meeting as something that was missing. And actually, when we reviewed the exercises where folks did what it means to care, even facilities, they're thinking they're the stewards of the facilities that serve the community, and it's through caring about the upkeep of those facilities that drives them. So I think that's a little bit of insight in how some of these words came to be where they are right now. But then we think about often something like safety. There will be specific performance metrics. That's something there's some hard metrics around, that are also going to be included in more of the measurable side of the plan. But yeah, it's a little bit of art and balance of where these things end up fitting in. But that's a little bit on just the evolution of this. Any other comments? All right. Well, thank you all for this feedback. It's definitely helpful, and I know it will be helpful to the team also as we're refining the next pieces that we're going to bring to you in the next meetings. Wanted to just invite Mark to tee up as we're thinking about success outcomes, and that's what will come the next session. We'll dive a little bit more into strategic areas of focus and how we're thinking about defining these success outcomes. But we'd love to invite Mark just to take us through a few minutes on what we mean when we're addressing success outcomes.
Sure, Lindsay, thanks so much. So pleased to hear the discussion, in regards to mission and vision, right? Mission being what we do, and certainly was good to hear the discussion and folks recognizing the words around what it is that we do with mission statement. Vision being what we strive to become. It's the aspirational. It's what we are not yet, but we wish that we were. And certainly pleased that there's interest and attraction to us not having 75 words in our mission rather than having 4, so that people might actually remember what it is that we do, as opposed to not even be able to do the first 3 words. The success outcomes are what we intend to produce. So not what we intend to do, what we intend to produce in the short term in the pursuit of our longer vision. Vision is typically a 3 to 5 year journey, whereas our success outcomes are what are we committed to producing, not what we're committed to doing, what we're committed to producing, the outcomes that we will produce. And that is ultimately what the board holds the management team accountable to executing on. Now, sometimes we'll miss, right? Sometimes we won't produce the outcomes. That doesn't mean that the management team failed. It means COVID might have occurred, right? I mean, different things will happen that prevent us from realizing our outcomes. But there's a discussion that takes place. And it really helps a board to recognize my responsibility is to think about, is the management team producing the outcomes that we agreed at the outset of the year, rather than getting into the activities of the organization, whether it's a transit agency, a community hospital, or a county government, quite honestly. It's how do we manage to the outcomes which we care about. So with that as kind of setting that up, let me take you into a few slides that will help to illustrate this concept of making the decisions, and they're really hard to do, about where you want to be best in class. And the reason that I say that is so many government agencies struggle because they try to be good at 42 different things. And it's not possible to be good at 42 different things. It's making the very purposeful decisions are where are you wanting to be amazing? Where are you willing to be good? And where are you willing to accept just sort of doing the basics, being really purposeful? You can't be great at 42 things. And so we start with this concept of where do you want to be best in class? What's the most important outcome for you to be able to get right? So a frame that I might give for you on that, if you can go to the next slide for me, is you think about an organization that's amazing at quality and less concerned with price. So the example that I would give to you would be Apple, right? An organization totally focused on being amazing at quality, but they'll charge you. A friend of mine just got their iPhone today. It was $1,400. I mean, it's just, that's what they charge. Pay it or don't. They're focused on the quality of what it is that they do. On the inverse of that, you begin to think about organizations that are amazing at price, but less concerned with quality. So a lot of people might say Walmart, right? Walmart would jump out at them. Focused on price, less so with quality. I think the example we have for you tonight is Motel 6, right? That they are committed to keeping their prices low. They're less concerned with the quality of what it is that they do. Now, here's the part that's interesting. I would argue that Apple and Motel 6 are the same organization. They are strategically focused on achieving where they want to be best in class. Apple wants to be amazing at quality. They'll charge you $1,400 to make a phone call. Motel 6 is committed to being low price. You might have to be on hold for 20 minutes while you're trying to check in, right? It's just, that's not how it's going to work. They're thinking about things in a very different way. It's the recognition we can't be amazing at 42 things. We've got to pick where we're willing to be best in class. And it's that recognition we're going to be less good in other spaces like Apple, like Disney, like Motel 6, in thinking about those categories. Go ahead, Lindsay. And I say this, you know, for those that are so passionate about what it is that LTD does, is that you can have absolutely anything. You truly can. I led an organization that produced results that you couldn't have imagined. But we had to sign up to be really bad at other things. You can't have anything, but you just can't have everything. It's making the choices, and the part that you build, and I know that the CEO is thinking about this as she begins to move towards finalizing a strategic plan that will come to the board. It's the recognition of what are we going to sign up to be great at, and align with the board on those topics, and recognize we can't be great at everything. We have to be willing to be less good on certain topics so we can execute with amazing focus on the topics that we've selected to be great. I want to play a clip for you, which you will have heard many times, so I would urge you not to focus on the details of what you're about to hear President Kennedy say, but instead listen to the president as he talks about taking long-range goals and acting with urgency in a short-term manner. Listen to how the president talks about taking time and budget and using it to realize those long-range goals. It's such a beautiful commentary of the president here, of acting with purpose to realize an amazing vision.
But the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
So as you listen to that, what we would call success outcome, we will send a man to the moon and return him safely to the earth by the end of the decade. There's only one way to define that. We will send a man to the moon, bring him back safely by the end of the decade. There's not multiple definitions. And so as the management team begins to crystallize the success outcomes in pursuit of the organization's vision, you will see clearly articulated outcomes just like that, man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade, those clear outcomes which we can all look at and know whether we achieved it or not. You'll watch organizations that say, we strive to provide the best donuts in all of the West Coast. How do you know? I mean, how do you know when that's occurred, right? What's the measurements by which you'll look at it? The point being, if we don't, as an organization, define what success looks like, then everyone else gets to do it for us. Reporters get to do it, elected officials get to do it, auditors get to do it. It's that clear definition of the outcome which we intend to produce. And then when other groups try to change the definition of success, it allows the management team, it allows the board to say, appreciate that, but we have clearly articulated the outcomes that we're committed to providing, and we're focused like laser beams on making that happen. So in the next iteration of what we come back, look for those very specific success outcomes in pursuit of the vision that will come from the CEO and from the management team that will ultimately go in front of the board for consideration. And from there, build the work activities to produce those outcomes, the KPIs to measure whether those work activities are working or not. Look for those all to be populated in the next version. Steve Jobs very famously said that it was deciding what not to do was every bit as important as deciding what to do. And that connects to that point of where do we want to be best in class, right? When Steve Jobs came back as CEO at Apple, there were 70 different computer projects going on. He cut it to 4. We're going to focus on the right things to produce the outcomes which we care about. And for Apple, it was quality. They focused on quality, which is why phones cost $1,400. But it was that decision about what they were not going to do, every bit as important as deciding what they were going to do. We can't be great at 42 things. We got to pick and we got to prioritize. So with that, Lindsay, I will throw back to you to wrap us up.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, so we just wanted to give a glimpse into some next steps, and I'll verbalize some steps beyond the next session as well that will make sure we'll get to you all, so you have a sense of what's coming at the next few meetings. But the most immediate next steps would be providing an update on the process of the plan to the board and seeking adoption of the communications plan. We would also be engaging the community through a targeted stakeholder survey that we'll talk about just after this session. We will then be working to finalize the mission, vision, and value statements, working in feedback that we're getting from this group, as well as the internal employee feedback, as well as that targeted stakeholder survey that you all will be invited to take as well. The next actual work session with you all is on May 4th. The topics that we will cover in that session will be these strategic areas of focus and success outcomes that Mark just spoke of. We'll also talk about the prioritization. So in addition to identifying those success areas, we also engage in prioritization so that there's real clarity around what's the most important elements to get right. And you'll see that's how we feed into the performance metrics and prioritizing all the way down to the performance metrics at the organization and department level. And then we'll also be reporting back on the communications activities and the outcomes of those. So summaries of themes that we're hearing based on those activities. Then after that, so June 1st would be the meeting coming after that. We expect we would actually have the full results of the community survey that we'd be able to share back and discuss with you all. We also anticipate having a pretty good draft that would include more of the metrics and tactics, and actually invite departments to share some of the high level details of their plans, so that you can start to see how organizationally they're thinking about tackling these areas. And then July 6th would be the final plan review. And that would, in July again, is when we would be seeking board adoption of the plan. So that's kind of a snapshot into what's to be expected over the next few months. And we'll make sure that you have that as well, just so that you're knowing what to expect as we go forward. But with that, I will just open it up to general questions or final comments on this particular portion of the agenda. All right. We'll certainly have.
That looks good. Thank you for laying. Sorry. Thank you for laying that out, Lindsay. It's helpful to see a roadmap for what the next 3 months will look like, or hear one.
Thanks. And we'll certainly, we'll have additional Q&A at the end of the communications plan as well. But one thing that we we do like to do, just to get a sense of where everyone's heads are at after these sort of strategic discussions, is we call it a one-word close. So it's just one word that represents how you're feeling after going through this session. So if we could just go around and just, again, share that one word. Maybe Leah, if you can help us make sure we catch everyone. So I'll start, and I'll just say my word is clarity.
Yeah, sure. I'll go. My word is familiar, and I'm just going to do a quick roll call. Sorry to put everyone on the spot. Alma?
I was going to take Lindsay's clarity as well.
Pete?
Conciseness.
Marianne?
Hopeful.
Great. Eliza?
I had hopeful as well. Same wavelength.
Good. Emily?
Progress.
Progress, is that it? Nice. And Jerry? You still here, Jerry? Okay. Franny?
Satisfied.
Satisfied. Awesome. And Counselor Evans? Okay. I'll hand it back to you, Lindsay.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to switch real quick and share a different screen. Thank you all again for the engagement. It's really, really helpful for this process. All right, so as you know, we shared very high level how we were thinking of approaching communications related to this engagement in the last meeting. And your comments and questions were really helpful in clarifying as we put some meat around the plan, working in collaboration with the team at LTD to flesh out more details of this. So I will, I know you had this in your packet, so I won't go into detail on every single element of the plan, but we'll quickly go through sort of the high points of it, and then we are happy to answer questions or take feedback as we're getting through this. So before I start, anyone on the LTD team, is there any context that you'd like to set before we jump in, or can I go ahead and get started?
You can go ahead and just,
Okay, super. So we have organized this into a couple of sections. So we start with the introduction, with laying out the overall goals of the communications plan. And then we outline some of the specific audiences and messages and tactics for during the plan development, as well as guiding the plan rollout. And then we also have a couple of elements like the appendix, the initial stakeholder list. And that's something too that we want to make sure that that you all are providing some feedback on as well as we get into this. And this is really around just best practices that we've seen other agencies and worked with other agencies through these processes. Really thinking about this strategic business plan, and especially the creation of it is very internally focused in terms of, identifying the structure that we're going to be organizing ourselves within the organization to deliver on these big areas, these big outcomes. And so we have two primary goals. We have the first goal is to inform, and it's both the workforce and the community about the process and the goals of the strategic business plan, as well as the final strategic areas of focus and priorities that are encapsulated in the plan. And that's to help to answer those questions about what a strategic business plan is and isn't. And that's something we'll talk about, some of the tactics around. The second is to solicit meaningful feedback at appropriate points in the process to actually inform the plan. So, I think we spoke on this the last time, and I touched on it briefly earlier. There has been a number of touch points that are informing this. LTD has customer satisfaction surveys that we've been looking at, and employee surveys, and has a number of plans and studies that have recently been completed. So some of that is really leveraging a lot of the work that has been done. But then we're also going above and beyond, and LTD is really committed and intentional about including the community survey as an example to really engage in asking the community and stakeholders for feedback on the plan, so that can help inform the priorities of certain elements, as well as the specific tactics of how we might move the needle on those big outcome areas. So we'll talk about more of that in a moment. So just covering during the plan development, so this period that we're in, and to be sure, the communications has already started from day one, but this is really just formalizing some of those activities. So there are during the plan development, the goal of informing covers a number of different audiences. So you see the LTD workforce, thinking about not just engaging at the management team level and the directors level, but thinking about getting out to the bus operators and the folks who are maintaining vehicles, and the folks who are running payroll, just everyone throughout the organization having an idea of how to access information. Some of that is informing them of the discussions and the process through the Inside the Bus. Some of it is through department meetings that are happening. You can see we've had some board one-on-ones already. We're still going to be having one-on-ones with new board members. The strategic planning committee, obviously, there's an element here of informing and sharing information. And then you can see some of the more passive modes of distributing information, like the website and social media, where that's information going out to the general public, as well as the internal website for the LTD workforce. The next area, goal 2, is around soliciting meaningful feedback. And so a lot of these same forums are both an opportunity to inform as well as to solicit that feedback. So things like Inside the Bus, there are times when we are presenting and sharing information, and then there are times when we're collecting information. So it was a really good forum, for example, to collect information around organizational values and really get feedback from a wide swath of the organization. You can see then, here on the Strategic Planning Committee, that is opportunities to provide feedback on a variety of elements of the plan. So getting into a lot more detail in comparison to this community stakeholder survey, where it's more high level. So getting some feedback on mission vision, getting some feedback on priorities for improving big areas like customer satisfaction and community value. So, so these would be the types of ways that we're engaging to get feedback from various groups in the process. Wanted to share a little bit more. We shared at a very high level the concept of doing the community stakeholder survey, and you all provided some good ideas for that, and also some questions around what it might look like. So these are just some examples of potential questions that we'll be working to refine with the LTD team. at a high level. So for example, sharing the draft mission and vision statements and asking the community or the stakeholder community to rate how well they believe that the statements are reflective of our purpose and what we're striving to achieve. And asking about why they selected that rating, so we have an understanding of what might be going through their minds as they're interpreting these statements. We could ask questions that will be really helpful to informing the priority levels of performance metrics, as well as the actual tactics that the team would take to improve customer satisfaction. So that's something that we can have things like the frequency or the fares or the cleanliness of vehicles or the courteousness or just various aspects of providing service and having the community help to pick and prioritize what those important areas are. And that's something that we can layer in with the customer satisfaction data, where customers that we know are writing the service have prioritized and use that as an input. Similarly, we can ask questions around the most important areas that LTD provides value to the community. That's an area in particular that we see a lot of differences in communities we work with. Some communities really value the jobs access, and that is, or the economic impact or things like that. There's other communities where sustainability is a real value, and the greenhouse gas emissions is something that they really look to the transit system to play an important role in. There's just a number of different values, and those are really unique to the community. So that's a big area that we feel could help inform the plan here. And then some of the other things could be touching on some of these big areas of focus, trying to get a sense of priorities among these big categories, things like customer satisfaction or financial stewardship or sustainability, big things like that. So that is just a little bit more about sort of the level of input that we're looking and how we might use that to inform more of the details of the plan. And then we go into the actual rollout. So thinking about, once the plan is formulated, how do we make sure that it's communicated to the appropriate folks, which is really everyone from the general public to the board to the entire workforce. So again, a lot of the same tactics are used, and communicating to the same audiences that were involved in the plan development. And you can see here the content. A lot of it is where to find the actual plan, where to find more information. It becomes a living document. So again, the management team will be reporting back on a quarterly basis to groups like yours and to the board for that transparency on how we're doing towards achieving those longer term outcomes. And so you can see just a number of places where that information will be disseminated. Just in terms of next steps, once the actual plan is adopted, we'll be working with LTD staff to execute on the plan, particularly the more public-facing aspects of the plan, such as the survey and the website information. We'll be supporting on content and messaging and some graphics that will help explain the process and communicate the plan and how feedback is being used to inform the plan. And then just wanted to share the initial stakeholder list, which was another area that you all provided some good feedback on. And oops, sorry, I don't know why this extra bar got in there. But something we're thinking about with the stakeholder groups are representing various types of organizations. So you can see grouping these organizations into equity organizations, social services, advocacy, the business community. You all as SPC members who represent larger organizations or constituencies, we are asking each board member to identify key groups in their respective sub-districts to have that geographic representation. ATU, the union, environmental organizations, educational partners. So really trying to get a good balance of perspectives from the community through this survey. So I think that is all that I have prepared in terms of slides for this, but would like to just answer questions or take feedback on any elements, and I can kind of jump around back to slides that we passed.
Franny, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I just had a couple on the stakeholder list. I think Lane County seniors and disabled services would be good to add. I don't see them. I see LCOG senior services, but the Lane County one. Also vocational rehab, because they're trying to connect people with jobs, and then those people that have new jobs with service. And one of the things on the questions, the survey questions out to organizations, especially these key organizations, is staff that work in these organizations, they have clients that rely on these services and need to get new services, perhaps through transit. I guess the question I would ask them is, do you see obstacles for their clients to connect to services? What are those obstacles? Those kinds of things I think would help, inform the business plan and get to that equity question.
Great, thank you, Franny. Any other comments or questions, feedback?
One more thing in educational, how about student government, U of O?
This is Marianne. I've got a question about the survey. How will people be invited to take it, or how will they know that it's available?
So that I believe it will be a digital survey, so it will be available online. It will be targeted, so it will be emailed to individual representatives from those groups. Pat, please jump in if I'm saying anything incorrectly. I think Pat is on. Is that helpful?
That's the answer. Our goal was to make it convenient and available to people who wanted to take it. Also, of course, for anybody who needs an accommodation, we can provide a written form, a mail-in form. And then for certain groups, it might actually entail a conversation because there's a lot to gather from during work groups. So we want to grab all that. We know that we're going to invite this group. Each of you represent an organization or a group of individuals, and really gathering that input from you as you gather that from your respective organizations is going to really help us create the fact that you don't just represent one person, you represent a whole organization of people who have individual thoughts about our process. So we're going to be looking forward to hearing that.
Two things, and I'm sure staff are already thinking about this, but we don't currently have a representative Lane County Commissioner on the committee. So just making sure that group is contacted. I know staff are already thinking about that, but just on my mind. And then on the rollout, the planned rollout, I noticed just quickly, there were a couple of places where it said maybe like, oh yeah, so on the website, the scorecard results, I just think that's such a useful tool, and the more it's used and more consistently it's used, you can point to it for the public to show that LTD is being transparent in tracking what success looks like and how we're getting there. I think is the more we can do that, the better. So I would say if it's optional, go ahead and do it, because I think that scorecard's a great tool, or will be.
Any other comments or questions?
This is a very robust communication plan. Thank you for how thorough and detailed this is.
Yes, absolutely. And definitely was, in collaboration with the LTD team. So I know they're really looking forward to rolling out. The website I think we'll be able to give you some more details on that, but it should be, if not this week, I think next week. So it's in process of being vetted, and there'll start to be information available to the public around, some of the high levels of what the strategic planning process is entailing, and content will continue to be updated there as a resource. So even as you're engaging with folks in the community, you'll have a central place that you can also point them to, that they'll be able to find some more information. So go ahead, sorry, Leah.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, so I think the hope from Lindsay, you all, and staff is that we make a recommendation on this plan to the board today. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. Tom, is there anything you'd like to share about that process?
No, that's exactly what we're looking for, Leah, is your recommendation on the communications plan that we then take to the board for adoption at their April meeting.
So with that in mind, do any SPC members have additional comments or questions, or do we feel good about recommending the plan as is, or as has been presented?
It's good to me.
Okay, can I get a motion? And I think there's an example in the board agenda packet, if anyone has it handy, a motion to approve the communications plan. Anybody? Anybody? Motion to approve?
I want to make sure you get the right language here. Sorry.
I'm not seeing specific language, but I will move to approve the communications plan as presented here.
I'll
Thanks,
second.
Marianne. Do I have a second? Thanks, Caitlin. And welcome. Glad you were able to get connected. I am going to do a quick roll call. This is Leah, and I approve. Franny?
Well, I just had those recommendations, but with those recommendations, I approve.
Excellent. Jerry, I think we might have lost. Is Jerry still on? Okay. Emily? Ooh, I might have lost Emily too. Okay. Pete?
I approve.
Thanks, Pete. Alma?
I approve.
Eliza?
I approve.
Counselor Evans?
I approve. Oh, let me see.
Great, thank you. Marianne?
I approve.
And Caitlin?
I also approve.
Okay, so it sounds like with those additional recommendations from Franny, we have unanimous support to recommend this to the board. And so Marianne and I will prepare a little update for the board's next meeting with some of our notes from the previous conversation. And I know staff will move forward the rest of the plan. Thank you all. Lindsay, Tom, AJ, anything else before we close out?
No, thank you very much for an engaged discussion. And I hope you feel more tied into how this plan is coming together, and I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you for your time. We know it's a lot, and it's a lot. We hope to bring you back updates at the next meeting, and we'll keep moving forward. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, Lindsay, for the great presentation and discussion, everyone, and we'll see you in May.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.